Oh, oh, that was today. Oh, come on in. I forgot. Hi, my name's Jason Hettel, but I'm better known as Steampunk'd Batman. Welcome to my shop where I do all of my creative work in creating my Steampunk Batman cosplay work. Come, follow me. This is the area in which I use all of my power tools for cutting plastics and carving foam. I do everything by hand. I actually don't have a 3D printer. I also use a lot of found objects. I try not to buy too much stuff, but then again, it never works out that way. As cosplayers, we all know that we end up spending a lot more to create our beautiful creations. So all my power tools are right here. I have a paint area in which I store all of my paints and brushes. It's a little bit of a mess right now. I've been trying to straighten a few things out. Like I said, I use all different kinds of things. I use everything from found object hoses. I do a lot of leather work, but I don't do it a typical sense. I also sew. I do set up my sewing machine on this table or the other table that I work on. And I keep my supplies of leathers and foams over here. So, and I use EVA foam, leather, plastics. I do a lot of my own faux painting. I do use actual copper and aluminum from time to time, and you'll be able to see that in some of the work that I've created. So, what we have here is my first cosplay creation, which is known as Steampunk'd Batman, which basically what I came up with this for is I'm a big fan of Batman just in general. And I had gone to a con to help support some friends of mine, and I'd never created anything before. And I was so thrilled with the way that they were getting greeted by everything they had created. I had decided I wanted to create a cosplay. So, since I'm a Batman fan, I decided to do a Batman cosplay. However, I didn't want to do one that was canon. I wanted to do something that was an original concept and something that was mine, so to speak. And hence, Steampunk Batman was born. Now, I worked on this in my old house in the basement for about 3.5 months, about anywhere between 6 to 12 hours a day. There's over 350 hours of work in it, and it's been upgraded a few times. But this is made with everything, including the kitchen sink, just about. I took found objects and I created different kinds of things to give the illusion of, for instance, the utility belt. These here are actually cell phone holders, old school cell phone holders that you would clip onto your belt. And I actually added some straps and some rivets to create them. This is a weightlifter's belt, but it's backwards. Usually the buckle's in the front. I did it so the buckle is in the back. I covered it with some faux leather before I got into doing a lot of leather work and created the actual belt itself. The chest pieces, the arms, basically they're made from old trash cans that I cut up, and then I took truck bed liner texture and I actually painted it on and let it dry, and then I actually did it all by hand. I chose the colors that I did because I felt that they would be more of the time period of like the late 1800s, which would be a time, the era of steam. Uh, the base of this is actually made from a pair of hockey shoulder pads that I altered. Um, the headpiece started off originally as a lacrosse helmet that I then added a Batman mask that a friend of mine had gotten in a Happy Meal for their son. So he gave it to me so I could add it in. Let's see, this has over, let's see, at this last count, I think it has over 1,000 rivets, which I actually hand riveted them in pop rivets. All of these silver ones that you see here. The straps are all made out of actual leather. And that's when I started learning how to do leather work and actually punch them in. They're all functional. It's how I actually get in and out of the suit. I actually started with a different set of gloves originally. Again, these are a pair of hockey gloves that I converted over to the gloves. These are actually made out of plastic syringes so that they would look like pistons, all hand painted, and then put some little upholstery rivets in, and then hand painted everything. They were a little bit cumbersome and a little bit bulky, so then I went to the next set that I created, which I took a pair of tactical gloves and I glued some pieces on and some plastic, some rivets. Again, I used some smaller syringes and painted everything. And because I wanted to be more gauntlet and they were really short gloves, I took some old leather sleeves off of a jacket and I actually attached them and then punched holes through to lace them up, leather laces. That was the second incarnation, but I still wasn't happy with them. And then I came up with the third incarnation, which is these gloves, which are actually leather motorcycle gauntlet gloves. And I actually, again, mounted some plates on it. I kept the fingers loose so that I would be able to grab things easier. Again, plastic syringes. And these actually slide right on over top of the actual gauntlets that are on the forearms. Some fun notes is the fact that like the batarangs are actually made from old recycled plastic and then hand painted. The bolo for throwing is actually a pair of 3 ping pong balls attached to string and then painted. And of course, you have to have your batarang gun, which I hand made out of a piece of leather. And then the gun is an old water pistol that I added some things to and added a batarang on it so that it could be taken out of the holster and fired at will. One of my favorite things that I really, really like about this particular one that I made was I'm only 5'10", and I wanted Batman to be imposing. So the first thing I came up with before I started working on the headpiece was I came up with the boots, which are actual tall boots. They're calf boots, but I wanted them to be a little bit taller. So I actually put on 1.5 inches of EVA foam padding and cut them to shape. But they looked a little bit cumbersome, like they didn't look quite right. And then I had seen a picture of old divers where their diving shoes had these big copper tips on the ends of the toes. So I decided to recreate that on here using EVA foam and then texturing it so that it would look a little bit old, and then painted it and added the rivets and everything, and it really, really summed it up, and it gave me an extra 1.5 inches of height. So then when I was working on the headpiece, I decided, well, I want to really make this imposing, and it would have been like back in the 1800s, cast shadows and everything like that. So that's why I decided to go with a very large ear. Plus, bats in general actually have very large ears. So I decided to create those, and it gives me a total height when I'm in it of 7'2". I figured that should be imposing enough. Let's see. This particular costume I call Steampunk'd Batman Volume 1, because in a little bit I can show you what I've created as far as the second version of this. However, this version, some friends of mine encouraged me to enter the New York Comic-Con Cosplay Championships. And on a whim, I entered, and I was accepted with no expectations whatsoever that I would actually win a prize. And I went through the process, went through prejudging, went through the actual judging, and lo and behold, to my surprise, after they had announced each division's winner, I was told to stand backstage. And I actually was like, well, what's going on? Why am I standing backstage? Well, I was backstage with 2 other people whose, unfortunately, I cannot remember, but you could probably find it on YouTube through the Sci-Fi channel, the actual event. And I ended up taking 3rd place, best in show, at being the honor of actually being the real #1 winner of the armor division as to what this was entered into. So I got my big check still, because nobody will cash it for me. So that's the big check that I was actually given, and that's how this all came about. Well, it's kind of a funny story, actually. One of my coworkers and his wife do large build cosplays, and back in 2018, I believe it was February of that year, they were doing an event. They were doing Monster Mania in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and they were in the process of doing all of Pee-wee's Playhouse They're known as Cheers on Wheels. Uh, Wonderful couple, and they